So WWE, on the heels of the John Cena heel turn, put out this top 30 list of the best heel turns of all time. It's not just WWE, it's for the whole business. And this list is so embarrassing. Medios and I in the Discord server were laughing at the ridiculousness of it. Some of these turns are great. I'm not saying these weren't memorable turns, but the order of these is just ridiculous. Like, some of these turns, the fact that Nikki Bella turning on Brie Bella is number 9. You're telling me that that's a bigger turn than, I don't know, Paul Bear betraying The Undertaker or the Mega Powers explode? Like, they're saying that Nikki Bella turning, embarrassing. It has to be self-masturbatory. Becky Lynch turning on Charlotte. Like, the list is embarrassing, and I thought about doing a whole video breaking down why the list is so bad. Well, number 1 is John Cena selling out. Now, here's the problem with that. Not only is that very self-serving and self-masturbatory by WWE, but yes, the angle at Elimination Chamber was very well done. However, it just happened. We can't really put John Cena turning at number 1 because we haven't seen the follow-up. What are they going to do with John Cena's heel turn? How are they going to book WrestleMania and the remainder of the year? That remains to be seen. I think when Cena's run is up, then we can look at what this turn meant for the box office, what this turn meant for the business, and for John Cena's character. But right now, we just can't do that. Yes, the angle itself was great, but there's a lot of other angles here that I feel probably were better. In fact, not better, let me take that back. A lot of these other angles were great, but also popped the business. And I do think that Cena's turn is going to mean way more interest for WrestleMania, but we just can't put it there just yet. So I thought, screw it. I did my own list. So on this video, we're going to go over my top 10 biggest and most important heel turns in professional wrestling history. A lot of you guys have been asking me to do more wrestling content, and many of you know that as much as I'm considered a Dragon Ball historian over on the Geekdom 101 YouTube channel, wrestling is my other big love, and I do consider myself a wrestling historian because I love wrestling. I've watched it most of my life. I've read, I don't know how many books, listened to endless amounts of shoot interviews, studied the business. So I'm going to give you the Geekdom 101 or the Danny, Big D, whatever, the 10 biggest and most important heel turns in wrestling history and why. Now, we're going to start with number 10, which is Stone Cold Steve Austin sells out at WrestleMania. Now, I want to, before we go any further, say that this turn actually had the opposite effect. The match with The Rock was amazing. The turn was shocking, but this turn led to the collapse of the business in 2001. The reason why it made the list at number 10 is because this singular turn, along with other factors, but Steve Austin becoming a heel is not what the fans wanted. And the reason why this is so historic is because this would literally be the beginning of the end of the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era was over here because from this point forward, for most of the year until the night after Survivor Series, Stone Cold was a heel and you could see the numbers dropping. The fans of that time did not want to see Stone Cold as a heel. So it's on the list actually because of its importance in the other way. This killed the Attitude Era. And if you go back and study the numbers, and this will actually shock you, I did a deep dive into WWE's house show business in 2001. I'm about to blow your mind here. There were house shows that were headlined by The Rock versus Stone Cold around October, November of the year during the Alliance, the Invasion angle. They were an MSG and they couldn't even sell out MSG. I saw one where they had like 5,000 people. We're talking about, listen to what I'm telling you because this is mind-blowing. Steve Austin and The Rock, the two biggest stars of the Attitude Era, had trouble drawing by the time we got to the fall and the winter. That should tell you how much this hurt the business. So it's important, but not for the right reasons. Now, number 9 on the list is Seth Rollins betrays the Shield in 2014. Why did I put this on the list? Well, Seth Rollins betraying the Shield in 2014 is not only a storyline that we are still feeling right now. On Raw, Roman Reigns came out to attack Seth, and it all started here. Seth and Roman have been feuding on and off, going all the way back to this moment. To this day, this turn is still factored into the storylines. We saw Roman Reigns get distracted by Seth in the Shield outfit last year, leading to Cody Rhodes beating him. We saw a lot of different things, but the main reason as to why I put this at number 9 is because this turn would begin the ascension of all 3 Shield members as single stars. Had this turn not happened, Seth would not have been able to cross over into a main eventer. Roman wouldn't have had his quest, and neither would have Dean Ambrose. They all would have been just sort of, and they were already kind of main eventers, upper mid-card guys, but this began their singles rise, and this turn was so effective that, if you remember, again, you have to go back to that time period. If you were not watching wrestling during that time and keeping up with the news, you might not know this, but the original idea was that Roman was supposed to be the only guy to have a real big singles push. Seth was not in the equation back then, which is crazy to think about because Seth would become this company man that would carry on and be one of the company's top guys since that event. And yet, look what it did for Roman and Seth. So this, I would say, is a very important turn because it popped off sort of the era that we're in now. It didn't start the era that we're in now, but it sort of started the planting the seeds, if you will, of what the business would be with the Shield and the Shield's impact on the business. So that's number 9. Number 8, Bret Hart turns on America, 1997. Some people think this is what started the Attitude Era because it was also a double turn where Steve Austin went babyface. Others think the Attitude Era started with the Austin 316 promo, but Bret Hart turning on America and becoming the pro-Canadian hero and the America hater began shortly before WrestleMania. The turn happened at WrestleMania, and then the subsequent episodes of Raw following WrestleMania 13, Bret was starting to cut anti-American promos. He reunited with Owen and Bulldog and started to reform the Hart Foundation. This one, here's why I put it on the list. This is a very important heel turn, y'all. Hear me out. Bret Hart going heel in 97 is what paved the way for babyface Steve Austin. This would be the main storyline of 1997 from March all the way to Survivor Series and would lead into not only the Montreal Screwjob, but the ascension of Stone Cold Steve Austin into being the top man in the business. So this turn is tied in with one of the most historic, infamous events in the history of wrestling, as well as the rise of Steve Austin. So when you have a turn that has that much impact long term, and it's interesting because a lot of the benefits that WWF got from this turn would happen after Bret was already out of the company. This would be the beginning of the WWF beginning to overtake WCW because in 97 WCW Nitro was still beating Raw, but this would begin the chain reaction to where it would lead to WWF in 98 catching up. And it all kind of roots back to this moment. Of course, the rebranding of Raw as War, all those things. So that's why it's number 8. Number 7, Ole Anderson turns on Dusty Rhodes. This is a classic turn that went back to 1980, Georgia Championship Wrestling in the Omni in Atlanta. Now, this is old school territorial stuff. Some of you guys might not know, but here's the story. So, Dusty and Ole had been feuding for a number of years and actually kept feuding. We'll get to that. At one time in 79-80, Ole turns babyface. Now, Ole was a vicious, vicious heel. But he turned babyface and he started to kind of feud with the heels. And at one time, he started to feud with the Assassins. And Dusty Rhodes came out to help him. Ole didn't even ask for his help. He just knew that Dusty would eventually help him. And this would lead to a massive angle in the Omni in Atlanta where the Assassins, it was the Assassins against Ole and Dusty in a steel cage tag team match. The cage door closes and Ole Anderson starts to kick Dusty Rhodes and they destroy the man in the ring 3-on-1. This was a huge risk because you were kind of screwing the fans of the main event because they didn't get that. They got Dusty being betrayed and that was their hero. This is still in the middle of the kayfabe era and this turn was so powerful that there were people that were trying to jump the rail and jump into the ring. The fans were so mad that Ole did this. And then the very next week on Georgia Championship Wrestling, he reveals that the entire year-long babyface run was all him purposely screwing Dusty. He had to pretend to like Lars Anderson. He had to pretend to like Dusty Rhodes, even though he hated it. He had to basically be miserable just to trap Dusty Rhodes and get him in the cage. And if you go back and trace the steps of the feud, everything made sense. This is classic territory wrestling. This is similar to the John Cena turn, actually, because Cody Rhodes and the way he's booked does follow a lot of what Dusty did. You know, he's obviously his son, so he absorbed a lot of the knowledge. But if you haven't seen this turn, I would highly advise you to go to YouTube and look at Ole's promo. This man was hated, and it kicked off a run of big shows that actually would lead into the mid-'80s when Dusty was feuding with the Horsemen. Ole was still with them in Mid-Atlantic. So, classic feud, classic turn. Number 6, The Rock joins the corporation and the Mega Powers explode. It's a tie. It's a tie. So I'll talk about both of them and why they are a tie. The Rock joining the corporation at the Survivor Series Deadly Game. This didn't even make the WWE list. How in the blue hell can someone from WWE do a biggest heel turn of all time, top 30, and put Nikki Bella turning on Brie and Kevin Owens turning on Sammy at NXT, which was great, and not The Rock joining the corporation at Survivor Series? This was the ascension of The Rock from upper mid to main event player. This was him winning the title for the first time, this first WWF championship, and this would lead to WrestleMania 15 and record business in 1999. 1999 was some of the most insane numbers WWF has ever done and is the one year where the house shows were selling out everywhere. Like almost every house show in 1999, they were still doing a lot back then, were sold out. Now, I'm not solely saying that The Rock's turn is the only reason, but the Rock-Austin feud would be legendary, and this would be another chapter in that feud. The Rock as the corporate champion, people have so many fond memories of it, and it was The Rock's chance at being a main eventer, and of course he caught that ball and scored the touchdown. The Mega Powers explode. Many have considered it Vince McMahon's greatest storyline. 1 year build-up. Hogan and Randy become friends at WrestleMania 4. There are very subtle teases that Hogan might be lusting after Elizabeth. Very subtle. SummerSlam, Survivor Series, some of the television, some of the Saturday Night's main events. It all would lead up to the eventual episode where it was Hogan and Savage against Akeem and Bossman, the Twin Towers, when Elizabeth gets nailed by Randy in a crazy bump. Hogan leaves to take her back to the infirmary. Randy's by himself fighting 2-on-1, and that would lead to him eventually attacking Hogan. Now, I put this here because it's very similar to the Rock feud, The Rock turning heel. The Randy Savage heel turn built up WrestleMania 5, right? 10 years prior to WrestleMania 15, right? but also the house shows were lit on fire. Remember, house show attendance and ticket sales back in those days, before television rights deals got so big, this is how companies made their money. This is how WWF made a lot of its money. So there were house show loops with Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan that were selling out everywhere, including in some markets that Hogan could not sell out in prior to this feud. People really went nuts for this feud, and some would call it the last great feud of the Hogan era, because after the Randy Savage feud, you had the Zeus feud, then you had the Warrior match, and then you went into the 90s where the WWF popularity started to wane. But also, WrestleMania 5 had the biggest buy rate, the biggest pay-per-view buy rate up until that point, because by the time 89 rolled around, more homes had pay-per-view, until the Attitude Era. So literally the majority of the 90s WrestleMania could not touch WrestleMania 5, the Mega Powers Explode. These are both very similar, and they both sort of feel the same way, because Randy and Rocky both were in that main event spot, and being the rivals of the top guys, namely Hulk Hogan and Steve Austin, is what became legendary. Randy Savage and Hogan is a legendary feud, as is Rock and Austin. So they're both tied for number 6. Number 5, Larry Zbyszko attacks Bruno Sammartino, also in 1980. This was the turn that everyone remembers from that era. You can look it up on YouTube. The footage is there. This turn made Larry the most hated man in the Northeast, to the point where this would lead to a number of sellouts in MSG and all around the loops, and eventually lead to a steel cage match at Showdown at Shea Stadium between Bruno and Larry Zbyszko that sold a lot of tickets. Now let me tell you a story about this. This is 1980, where people still believed in kayfabe. People still thought the business was a shoot, many of them. Both Bruno and Larry have told the story that after Larry Zbyszko turned on Bruno, that the New York mob, the mafia, literally the mafia, asked Bruno if it was okay if they took out Larry. Think about what I just told you. You want to talk about a different era? Think about what I just told you. Cena made Make-A-Wish kids cry? That's bad, right? Okay, think about this. The freaking mafia wanted to commit a homicide on Larry Zbyszko over a pro wrestling angle, and Bruno had to beg them not to. No, I'll take care of it in the ring. Let me get my revenge, and they let him. You don't hear that anymore, man. That 1980 was a different era. Those fans were a different breed, and they believed. So this kicked off a year of business and made Larry Zbyszko a main eventer, and that would follow him for the rest of his career into AWA, into WCW. So very important turn. Number 4, the Freebirds turn on the Von Erichs. 1983, Kerry Von Erich, Ric Flair steel cage match. Basically, Michael Hayes wanted Kerry to take advantage of, the help. He didn't want to. It would lead to Michael Hayes slamming the steel cage door on Kerry's head. And this one angle began the Freebirds and Von Erich feud that lit that territory on fire for 6 years. You want to talk about the bloodline being long-term storytelling. You want to talk about, the Randy Savage thing and the corporation. Those are all great. For the Dallas territory, for world-class championship wrestling, from this one turn, they got 6 years worth of feuding. Different types of matches, 6-man matches, tag team matches. You had different Von Erichs coming in and out. You had the younger Von Erich kids. You even had Fritz. This needs to be studied. And if you've seen the movie, The Iron Claw, that is not enough. You need to do more homework. Find a clip of this and the promos they cut after, because the Freebirds were the most hated trio in Texas, and this feud is why. This is old school heat, man. Number 3, Roman Reigns kicks off the bloodline in 2020. I cannot believe that in WWE's top 30, this wasn't on there. You do realize that when Roman Reigns turned heel in the summer of 2020, when him and Paul Heyman got together, that's the beginning of the bloodline. That is where the bloodline started. There would not be a main event Jey Uso. There wouldn't be Cody finishing the story. There wouldn't be the Sami Zayn push, the Drew McIntyre story. Everybody that's been intertwined with the bloodline, Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, the Guerrillas of Destiny, all these guys that are intertwined with Roman, it all began here. Why did that not make WWE's list? The reason why it's on here is because very similarly to the story of the Von Erichs, Roman Reigns turning heel and the bloodline angle literally kicked off the next 4 to 5 and even more years of storytelling. It led to The Rock coming back. It led to numerous WrestleMania main events, the Brock Lesnar feud. This is the big, in some ways, the reason why I would actually say that this may be bigger than Cena is because when Cena went heel, it was shocking, but it's only going to give us about a year or so of story. This Roman Reigns turn gives us multiple years. It all started here. It's shocking to me that this isn't regarded as one of the most important turns ever, especially when it comes to turning business around for WWE, because they weren't doing so well for a time there, especially creatively, and the Roman heel turn really pulled them out. So, yeah, man, that's my number 3. Now, I want to let you know the Cena turn is not on my list because we haven't seen the fallout from it. I'll let you know later in the year where it ranks when we see the whole story. But so far, this has already done more than enough for it to be on the list. Number 2, Andre the Giant turns on Hulk Hogan, 1987. Why? This would lead to what many consider and what probably is the biggest event in company history. Some would say the biggest of the 80s, WrestleMania 3, Pontiac Silverdome, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. This was look, I wasn't around. I was very, very, very young when this happened. I wasn't watching wrestling. But everybody I spoke to would tell me about the impact of Andre turning heel. It was a lot like John Cena and Hogan, because Andre had been a babyface for most of his run in the Northeast Territory and for years. And then he finally goes heel to overthrow Hulk Hogan, who had been champion for about 3 years at the time, not 4. And this would also lead to the main event rematch, which to this day is the most watched professional wrestling show in history. Hogan versus Andre 2 on the main event, Friday, February, I think 22nd, it might have been 26th, 1988. All of that, the biggest stadium show of the 80s and the biggest television viewership was Hogan versus Andre. You cannot discount it, folks. Look at the numbers, look at the metrics. Yes, the Savage feud was bigger on house shows, but Andre was not working house shows because he was older, he was beaten up. Hogan was feuding with Kamala and different guys on the house shows. Orndorff, who almost made the list. But the Andre feud is a very important part of history. And number 1, Hulk Hogan is the third man. Look, bro, the NWO is more than just an angle that WCW ran for 3 years. Obviously, the biggest merch seller in the business besides the Austin 316 shirts. Obviously, you've got a situation where Hogan turning heel would continue WCW's dominance over WWF and would eventually lead to WWF making Raw live every week, which it was not prior to this era. And as a result of Raw being live every week, it changed the way that we consume wrestling. Now Raw is live every week and so is SmackDown. Prior to these events, it wasn't. Hulk Hogan's heel turn led to incredible business, huge matches, and the reason why it's number 1 is because, like Cena, it was 15 years in the making, give or take. Something, maybe not 15, maybe like 10, maybe 12. Because Hogan was a face in AWA in 83. But still, that's number one. I mean, I watched this live. I still have my VHS tape recording of this Bash at the Beach 96. It just changed the business forever. Like, this turn literally changed how we consume pro wrestling. When your turn is so big that you change the way television shows are produced, and it wasn't just this turn. I mean, there were other factors. I'm just kind of simplifying it here. This would continue that. That's when you know it's legendary. You could put the Andre one at number one if you feel like it, or even, I mean, any of these could be number one if you really want to, but that's my list. I think it's better than WWE's, because WWE's, I mean, come on, dude. Like, it's a joke. What do you think? Do you have a list of your favorite turns? It doesn't have to be the ones you consider most historic. Like, this is like, I made this list based on historical importance, on the shock value of it, everything. Are there any heel turns that you think should be put on there? Let me know in the comments. Take care of yourself, y'all. I had fun doing this, and I'll see you soon.